everyone, and welcome to the Grace Podcast. It is our first podcast for 2023, and we are so excited that you guys are tuning in with us today, whether that's via vlog or whether that's via podcast as well. We are so stoked to have you with us. I'm really excited for our first podcast this year. We are going to be chatting with Colin Edmonds, and Colin has been working in the ministry world for many years. If you've watched any online services or if you live around the Kloof, Durban area, then you'll also maybe recognize his face as he worked with Open Skies in Kloof for many years, and he's actually in a new venture and a new season of his life at the moment. So Colin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then maybe also this new venture that you're in at the moment?
Awesome. Kerry, thanks so much. And hi to everybody who's listening or watching. And it really is a great privilege to be able to share. And just a huge shout out to you guys at Grace for what you're doing and the many lives that you are serving. And welcome again to everybody listening, and welcome to 2023. I think some of us are a little apprehensive, going, my gosh, another year, how quickly. It's like the last 3 years have been a blur, but like, quick, but also like super slow. Like, it feels like a long time ago since we were wearing masks, and also just the other day, So, our lives. So, my life would be wrapped up in my family's life. So I have a wonderful wife. Her name's Antonia, originally from Italy, came out to do our church intern program, and we ended up falling in love, and we've been married for 10 years. We got 3 beautiful kids, Emma Milan, Roman Judah, and Orlando Justice. They are 6, 4, and 2. So our house is busy because we have 3 toddlers, but they're also Italian toddlers. So there's a lot of volume. I don't think they've ever learned to whisper. I'm not sure whispering is in the Italian language, but it's lots of fun. Chaotic, fun. And today was my daughter's first day at grade 1. And my little guy went at 2 years old, and he sobbed as we left him. So my wife sobbed as we left them, which meant I sobbed. So been lots of tears. So hopefully today we can have a little bit of laughter. But yeah, that's our lives. That's our family's lives, certainly. And we've been pastors, both my wife and I. She's been for the last 10 years, myself for the last 18 years at our church, in a whole bunch of different roles: youth pastor and young adults and intern programs and outreach and associate pastor. And now we have the wonderful privilege of stepping out. And to be honest, I don't know the answer in terms of what exactly we're going to be doing, but we really just feeling the stirring of God asking us to pioneer and to take a step of faith. And so that's really what this year is about for us. I do also lead a nonprofit that is part of our church called True Life, and been doing that for the last 12 years. And its real focus is education and schools, where we're coming alongside kind of social ills, so mental health, addiction, abuse, bullying, leadership. And it's a great privilege to lead the team and really to see lives change for Jesus. So that's a little bit of who we are, and I hope we can help today as we chat through some of the stuff.
Definitely. And before we go forward, how, if anyone's wanting to look more into your NPO, how would they be able to find you?
Awesome. Probably the best way is on our website, True Life. So True Life is spelled TRULIFE, so no E in True. truelife.org.za. You'll be able to see some of the work that we're doing there.
Awesome. That's great. We love to be able to punt NGOs and NPOs that are local that people can get involved with. And we've got so many people internationally who watch as well and want to know how they can get involved in the South African area. So I really love that you're able to share that with us today.
Thanks.
So as some of you who are watching this podcast might be Sunday attendees as well, we're in the middle of a series called As For Me on Sundays, online as well as in person. It's basically wrapped around the scripture from 2 Timothy about, as for me, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, and I have kept the faith. And it's been a phenomenal series. If you've missed any of the weeks and you want to catch up, you can watch that on our YouTube channel as well as on Facebook. It's really been a phenomenal way to start the year of 2023. But you may be wondering why I'm wanting to chat today with Colin around this topic, because it's quite an interesting 3 sentences. And it's something that I think you're going to be learning a lot from Colin today, and because he's got some great stories and some great wisdom to share. He's had a lot of life experience. Like he said, there's been many roles he's played in, and lots of times where he's had to really keep the faith with him and his wife and his family. So really looking forward to the next 10 to 15 minutes chatting with you, Colin. And
thank you.
Basically, how I'd like to start this all out, right? We talk about fighting the good faith. And
Yes.
I would love to know just for you, from your side of it, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to fight the good faith, and how can we play that out in our own lives? Maybe an example from you.
Awesome. Great question. And I love the series, by the way. Great way to start off the year. And I think the verse that we're looking at says that, as for me, I'm going to fight that good faith, finish the race, and really complete the task that God's given me. The verse before gives us a little kind of insight into what that means or how that outworks. And it's Paul writing to Timothy, says that his life has been poured out like a drink offering. And maybe not language we would use today, but perhaps what that's saying is my life, I don't consider my life as highly as I ought to, or perhaps the way that the world has told me I should. And I think that perhaps the best way that we stay true to who God's called us to be and to finish this race is by regarding ourselves, our lives, less than the world kind of says we should. I think much of the time we place ourselves at the middle of the story, or certainly the world around us, the culture around us places us in that central space, and then kind of others and God. And I think the way God would certainly map it out or blueprint it in the scriptures is that he's central, and then it's others before us. And I think perhaps one of the best ways that you and I will stay faithful is when we remember that it's not about us, is that God's called us to pour out our lives. And maybe that statement of fight the good fight, I think that's a pretty interesting use of words by Paul. Perhaps it's this idea, this fight against our own flesh. Many of the times our faith really is diminished when we sit on the throne of our lives as opposed to God, where we become, in many ways, we might not think it like this, but we sit on the throne, we become the master, and we tell God, what our day's, agenda is, as opposed to, hey, God, you're sitting on the throne today. I serve you and I serve others. And so I think, look, there's a challenge for all of us to deny that flesh, to make sure that our faith is about him and about others. So I think that would be the starting point for me, is how do we finish this race? How do we make sure that we complete the task? It's about less of us and more of him and more of others.
Definitely. And it kind of lends itself to that scripture when God's word says that if we put him at the center, everything else comes together. Everything else falls into place. Whereas if we're at the center, if we're on the throne, as you're saying, those things don't fall into place. They start to fall apart. So definitely an interesting topic. When we talk about finishing the race as well, that can be interpreted in so many different ways. But I know that you have a very interesting comrade story for us. And I'd love if you could just share that with our listeners and our viewers, and maybe what you've learned from that race, what it's taught you in your own life and spiritual life.
Amazing. Thank you for the opportunity to share. It was a pretty brutal day for me running the comrades, as anyone who I guess has taken on something that's beyond themselves. Look, for context, the year before I hadn't even run a 5-kilometer stretch. So to run the comrades, which they name the ultimate human race for a very good reason, was probably a bit of an overstretch. And I'm not a natural runner either. And so during the course of the year, I ended up picking up RTB, which is a runner's injury, and then I got sick. And so I went into comrades, without any training for the last 3 months, really undercooked in terms of my mileage. Really, I shouldn't have been there, but we ended up arriving, and the comrades beginning was everything that everybody made it out to be. It was like all the gears, it was all the feelings, like the Shosholoza, the national anthem, the camaraderie. And really the first 27 Ks for me, I felt like I was running on a cloud. I was like, this is easy. What have people, made the big deal about? And then at 27 Ks, I ended up getting a cramp in my thigh, which was the first time I've ever cramped running. I got a whole bunch of other things that have gone wrong. I just totally panicked. I probably shouldn't have, but I ended up taking like salt tablets and then more salt tablets and then more salt tablets. And after about 2 Ks, I ended up throwing up all over the place and ended up doing that for the next 30 Ks. So all the nutrition you're meant to put in your body and so it was all sorts of horrific. And I ended up going down Fields Hill. For those of you that know it, kind of near Kloof area. I've driven it for many years. I never knew it was that steep. My shin splint, it was really brutal. And towards the bottom of Fields Hill, the 2 12-hour buses had gone past. And so in many ways, it felt like it was over. And then this unofficial bus, which is basically this just running group of people, came past me, and they had these two coaches. And I looked and thought, I think these guys are like, they're probably going to make it. So if I just stick with them for the next couple of hours. And so the 4 darkest hours of my life, where I just made a decision, when they say run, we run. When they say walk, we walk. And it was a deep dive. And I kept saying over and over, if I stay with them, I'll make it. If I stay with them, I'll make it. And I ended up doing that all the way through down into Durban. And about 5 or 6 Ks out, the language changed. And I sort of say, not just I'm going to make it. I started to go like, I'm going to make this thing. Like I started to really believe. Came into town, down past McDonald's, and one of the coaches turned and he said, I don't think we're going to make it. And so I left that crew of kind of 50 runners and put my total heart and soul into everything I could. The last 3 kilometers, deep pain, deep dive, ran into the stadium believing I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it, under the stadium, into the stadium, onto the grass, and heard 10, 9, 8, and just didn't make it. I think I ran in at 12 hours and 1 minute. Friend of mine actually ends up sending me a video of like me just dropping my head. And I remember like going through and people were super encouraging. They're like, you made the distance, and like, but I really wanted to finish on time. And I remember being like brutally disappointed, like going, God, I just don't understand. Like I did everything. Like I did everything I could. Like, could have you not just like where and I remember processing this disappointment. And I remember feeling God speak into my spirit that I think many people are at this space where they're like, God, I just don't get it. I'm so disappointed. Like I just don't feel like I deserve that diagnosis. I didn't deserve that divorce. I didn't deserve that bad news or that retrenchment. And I think for a lot of people, they're sitting in that disappointment. And what I started to realize is we have a decision in that kind of camping place of disappointment. Will we rise and dream again? Or will we camp out in disappointment because of fear of new disappointment to await us in the future? And an interesting study on the word dream. It's a Greek word or Hebrew word, chalam, spelled CHALAM. And theologians battle to actually decide which word it's going to be, the word dream or the word strength and health. And so they got to really study the scriptures to understand which word is it here. And what I find fascinating is that the root word of dream has health and strength in it. And so you think about when we stop dreaming, the health and the strength that God wants to give us in our bodies, in our minds, in our families, in our businesses, when the enemy is able to, through disappointment, rob us of that dream. And that's what happens, right? Wherever we get disappointed, failure, that disillusionment, we disengage from people, and we end up isolating, going, I'm not going to dream again. Like it's not worth the disappointment again. And I don't know who's listening. What I know is that the last 3 years have been extremely brutal, probably a lot harder than at Comrades. And for many people, they've looked and gone, man, I don't know if I can get up again. I don't know if I can dream again. And my encouragement would be that if we don't dream, we die. If we don't dream, we end up, the very health and life that God wants to bring to our bodies won't be there to sustain us for the days ahead. And so I would implore each of us, the way that we remain faithful to the end, the way that we don't give up the good fight, is we keep dreaming. And if you think about Ephesians 3:20, it says that God will do more than we could ask, think, or imagine, or dream, according to his power, his health, his strength that is at work within us. And so, yeah, that would be my real encouragement out there, Comrades, is to go like, man, life is full of disappointments. And I think in some ways this world has sold us this like success culture. And so we feel like we got to succeed and we got to have victory. And I just think when we flip through the scriptures, like almost every page is got some kind of disappointment or failure. Now, I know that can feel like, oh, well, that's very discouraging. But I guess what we need to understand is that disappointment has a way of teaching us lessons. It has a way of connecting us to people. It has a way of creating empathy and understanding. And it also has a way of removing us from the centrality of the story. And so if we can step aside for a moment and go, man, that disappointment was there not to keep me from dreaming again, but for me to recognize that there's some great lessons. What are they, God? And I'm never going to stop dreaming. I'm going to keep going one foot in front of the other.
I think that's so great, because it's exactly what you and I were chatting about briefly before we started chatting now officially.
Yeah.
And the fact that disappointment can be so crippling. It's, I think so often, and I'm saying this because I've experienced it myself, where I want to dream, I want to open up that side of myself again, but sometimes I've almost been paralyzed. And so it's almost hard to merge the want, the desire, and the actual actioning. To take that step. And you were talking about digging deep, especially for those last 3Ks as you're coming up to the stadium, digging deep. I don't know if you can just briefly share with us, like, if someone is needing to dig deep, is there something practical that you found for yourself that has helped you to do that?
Yeah. Look, I think one of the gifts, even though I ended up running in 12 hours and 1 minute, is that I ran in with 50 people. And the people around me, there was so much deep spirituality about the significance of a coach and people around you and community and, people cheering you on and the right nutrients. And I guess, for anyone listening, I guess, firstly is to recognize that God's heart is so for us, like his heart breaks. I think about this morning as my 2-year-old son is like weeping because he's like disappointed we're going, and his mom and dad are weeping as we leave. We're not, our hearts are also breaking with his little heart, but we know it's good for him and we know it'll stretch him. And so first and foremost, it's not to dig deep in your own strength. I think that is a place we can all get into. It's almost like, well, God, I'm going to do this on my own. That would not be God's heart as a dad. He would want you to know that his heart breaks. And I think that was a big thing for me. I was pretty disappointed and angry at God, to be honest, in the first 3 days of the comrades. I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I prayed, I told you, you just need to like carry me. Like, you can do that. Like, you parted Red Seas, God. Like,
exactly.
But I realized that he too was disappointed. And I realized he too was grieved. And if you think about the account where Jesus visits his friend Zacchaeus, and he's also Zachariah, or who is it? Martha, Mary's brother. He's passed away, and his heart is so grieved that he's brought to tears. And so I think first and foremost is it's not you and him, that's you with God. It's you recognizing that he too breaks because there's a broken world. And then from there, I guess it's that community and getting people around you. I think for all of us, when it comes to the word, worship, and prayer, those are 3 pillars for all of us. One of those tend to feel a little easier to connect with God. Some of us, it's the words. For some of us, it's worship. I would suggest to you in your time of difficulty and strain, that kind of desert disappointment time, find the one that comes easy to you and do a lot of that. I think that all 3 are needed. But I think God is gracious enough to say, man, if you're just going to put on worship and go for a walk, man, I'll heal your soul through that. And so that would be my encouragement, is go to your pillars, go to your community, and trust God enough that he is able to do Romans 8:28. He's able to turn all things to good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose.
And that's great, because, in our second week, when we were talking about finishing the race, we had Wayne Taylor sharing with us, one of our new pastors. And he was sharing a John Maxwell quote where he said that there are 3 ways that a person can grow: by being hurt and we're forced to grow, by learning and therefore we want to grow, or by receiving and therefore we're able to grow. And so I think what you're saying ties so well into what John Maxwell's quote says about when we are hurt. Because disappointment is hurt, and bitterness is hurt, and and it's an opportunity for us to grow in those spaces as well. So I think that's a really great point that you've made there. And as we look at the third point that Paul mentions in his lesson, he's talking about, as for me, I will fight the good fight, I will finish the race, and I will remain faithful, or in some translations, I've kept the faith. To be able to, in my personal opinion, to be able to say that at the end of your life, I think that's an incredible testimony, first and foremost, because there's so much that comes at us from all around. But I'd love to just know from you, Colin, what does it mean? How can we remain faithful? What is something for you in your own life that's helped you to remain faithful?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And excuse the like continuous running analogies, but we'll keep the
Oh,
comrades
yeah.
theme going. So I think what I've recognized is how often we end up encouraging others when they're doing well. You hit your targets, you preach a good sermon, your kid comes first in class. But what I recognize is that I needed greatest encouragement when I was weakest. And so perhaps when it comes to finishing strong and keeping the faith and being faithful to the end, a lot of that has got to do again with others. And so if we can continually just remember that, man, you know, for a lot of us, we look back over the last 3 years and go, it wasn't what we had hoped for. It wasn't what we expected. There was a lot of things that went wrong. But for many of us, we're still standing. And just yesterday, I was at coffee with a friend, and he was like, "Man, I'm not where I want to be," and I get that. Like I get those disappointments. But I just wanted to encourage him and say, "Man, do you know how much further you are than if you had quit, than if you had like thrown in the towel?" And so for many of us, like I think about moms who are out there that are just so exhausted from just being a mom, and what these last couple of years, teachers and business people having to pivot the whole time and come up with new ideas. And my encouragement would just be like, man, firstly, let's just start by recognizing that we're still here, that we're still standing. If you're engaging in this podcast, you're doing a whole lot better, even spiritually, than you think you are. You're taking the time out of your week, and I just want to commend you because God sees that. And so I would just encourage us continually to go. I guess it's what you say. Like, what do you want at the end of your life? And as much as what I want today is often a lot about me, at the end of my life, I want it to be about Him. That well done, good and faithful servant. And so I guess as Romans continually speaks about, practice playing second fiddle, find ways to eat humble pie, find ways to make your life not about you, and you'll find yourself staying on that path of faithfulness. So, yeah, I guess that would be my encouragement: is encourage others in this journey because they need it, and even if they didn't, score the winning run or kind of get over the finish line first, just keep encouraging them because we all need a lot of encouragement. And then for yourself, encourage yourself because you're doing better than you think you are.
Totally. Self-talk is so important in those
So
kind of
good.
times. I know I've personally felt when I've changed that dialogue within myself,
Yes.
it's made such
Yes.
a difference, whether it's just perspective or even sometimes the outcomes. It
Yes.
does make such a huge impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good. So
So,
good.
Colin, I've really enjoyed this time together. And as we're wrapping up, I would love to just know if there's any practical takeaways or if there's one thing that you'd love to leave our viewers and listeners with, what would that be?
Sure. I would probably go back to the idea of dream versus disappointment and really encourage our listeners. I look at my three kids and the imagination and the fantasy and the worlds they live in. There seem to be very little restrictions. And I know that many times we can look and go like, oh, but they're just kids. But aren't we just kids in our Father's arms and life? And I think too much of the time, we've ended up putting it, our lives in our own care, in our own strength, trusting ourselves, our own ability. And I would encourage you to spend some time in God, but with the intentional thing, perhaps even take this week and go, God, what are the dreams? What have I shelved? Where have I let disappointment come in? And I believe as you start to dream again, and it will be raw and I think about perhaps people who have lost loved ones, or perhaps people who have gone through a divorce and go, God, I can't dream again. Like there's just too much pain. But I encourage you as you begin to trust God in that space and you begin to dream again and you allow yourself to dream again. And I know it's risky, but you're dreaming in God's space. You're not dreaming in your own space. And so you're going, God, I don't know what you have for me, but I'm believing that it's good. And as people begin to do that again, my prayer, and I really will pray for everybody listening, my prayer would be that there would be the sense of life that starts to fill your lungs again. And you go, man, I actually think that perhaps some of my greatest days are ahead of me. And I don't necessarily mean rands, cents, and fame and success. I mean some of the most significant, God-breathed, purposeful days lie ahead of you where you go, oh, this is what God has created me to do.
I love that. I love that line you said there, that it's about it's the dreams that God has. How did you word that?
Yes. Oh, now you're asking me. I think it was around significance rather than our own success, and that it was like his God-breathed dreams, as opposed to our self-made man dreams. Yeah.
I love that. I think it's almost like the eternal perspective.
Totally.
And taking our eyes off of, because it's easy to be seeing exactly directly in front of us instead of what's to come and what God has. So I think those kind of dreams, like you say, those big dreams. I think it's Craig Rochelle who says, if your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough.
Very good.
So I think that's
very
really
good.
wonderful. It's very encouraging to me personally, even as well.
Awesome. Awesome.
So thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Such a pleasure. Thank you for having me on today. It's been a real privilege and hope it's been helpful.
It's been so helpful. It's been so great to have you, Colin. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who tuned in as well.
Yes.
If you want to find out more about Colin, you can follow him on social media. We'll be tagging him in this post, so it'll be easy for you to find him. Otherwise, don't forget you can check out his NPO True Life as well. And we really look forward to seeing you guys for our next podcast and our next series coming up in the following month. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, Kerry. Thanks. Bye, guys.